Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. The sun is shining, come on, get happy. The Lord is waiting to take your hand. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're going to the promised land. We're heading across the river, wash your sins away in the tide. It's all so peaceful on the other side. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. Chase your cares away. Hallelujah, get happy before the judgment day. The sun is shining, come on, get happy. The Lord is waiting to take your hand. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're gonna be going to the promised land. We're heading across the river, wash your sins away in the tide. It's quiet and peaceful on the other side. Forget your troubles, get happy, your cares fly away. Shout hallelujah, get happy, get ready for your judgment day. Come on, get happy, chase your cares away. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy, get ready for the judgment day. Sun is shining, come on, get happy. Lord is waiting to take your hand. Hallelujah, come on, get happy. We're going to the promised land. Heading across the river, throw your sins away in the tide. It's all so peaceful on the other side. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. You better chase all your cares away. Shout hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready for the judgment day.
Hello, Garland Gabbers. Welcome to another episode of the Garland Gab. We have a very special episode today. We are celebrating the publication of the new Making of Summer Stock book. And we are absolutely thrilled that the two authors have agreed to join us today. That's my dog peeping up, was on my lap. Yeah. And discuss all things summer stock. So we'll introduce David Fantle, mostly in collaboration with Tom Johnson, has been interviewing, writing and speaking about Hollywood's golden age stars for 40 years, where their work has appeared in media outlets throughout the world. Fantle's career has also included more than 3 decades working as an award-winning marketing and public relations professional, including a tenure as Deputy Tourism Secretary for Wisconsin. He resides in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and is an, I don't know what this word is, adjunct professor?
Yeah, it's like a part-time professor, adjunct, yes.
Okay. Film at Marquette University?
Yeah, Marquette University, yes.
Perfect. Tom Johnson began his collaboration with David in 1978 as a student journalist at the University of Minnesota by co-writing an award-winning arts and entertainment column for the Minnesota Daily called Entertainment Limited. Johnson was a senior editor at Netflix and has written movie reviews and features for E! Online, Movie Phone, and People magazine, among other publications. Johnson's entertainment writing has been recognised with a Minnesota Newspaper Association Achievement Award and a National Heart Foundation.
Hearst is a huge media chain in the States.
Big newspaper chain.
Oh, okay.
There used to be.
Yeah.
So a National Hearst Foundation Award for news writing. So welcome, David and Tom. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be here, and it's always fun to talk about in these times, particularly, right? You know, people with what's going on in the world. You know, you look at the book; it says, "Come on, get happy," and Tom and I got hooked on the musical films as friends in middle school growing up in St. Paul, Minnesota. And behind me, you might see a poster called That's Entertainment, which was the 1974 compilation of all those great MGM musicals. And that's really what hooked us on the musical film genre. But I think there was an underlying rationale why that film was so successful and sparked such a nostalgic craze, is because 1974 was a very troubling time, not just in the States, but in the world. In the States, we were just getting off of the Watergate crisis at the presidential level. We were at the end of the Vietnam War, which is a long, enduring process. We were having gas lines, and the slogan for the film was, "Boy, do we need it now." It was referring to, we need the escapism and the pure enjoyment that these musical films provide. And here we are now in 2023, and I think we need a 109-minute break of escapism to go watch a movie like Summer Stock. So I think our book is coming out at a fortuitous time, because regardless of what's going on the 24/7 news cycle, we need to take a break. And what a better break than a musical film?
Absolutely agreed, 100%. And I suppose following on from that, if that's entertainment was the catalyst or the opening to the musical films, what brings you to writing a book on summer stock? We've got obviously the likes of Oz, we have Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane, all these other, I suppose, bigger, well-known classic films. Of course, we three love and adore summer stock, but what brings you to writing a book about summer stock?
Well, we thought it was an interesting idea because the backstory was so unlike so many other musicals. The behind the scenes drama, it was Judy's last film after 15 years at MGM, and she was kind of at a low ebb professionally and emotionally. She was going through all kinds of stuff. Gene Kelly was on the ascendancy. It was right after On the Town, his personal favorite film in 1949. And right before An American in Paris, and then Singing in the Rain the next year. And so we thought there was this dramatic backstory behind this film that really wasn't behind a lot of other film musicals of that era. Easter Parade, Barclays of Broadway. All of those films had some sort of a dramatic kind of backstory. But Summer Stock, it was absolutely amazing that it ever got made, because it had, the plot of the film itself was a bit trite. It was like let's put a show on in a barn kind of stuff that Mickey Rooney and Judy would have done, 6, 8 years, 10 years previously. And none of the principals, Gene, Judy, and director Chuck Walters, wanted to do the movie. It was sort of one of these things that they felt they had to do. And Chuck Walters and Gene actually decided to, stick with it as bracketing support for Judy, who was so, needed friends and support around her. And that's why they sort of agreed to do it. Gene, said it was a piece of, as we would
Profanity.
say, profanity shite, and he didn't want to do it. Chuck Walters wrote a memo to Dory Sherry, who was taking over as head of production at MGM from Louis B. Mayer, saying, no, this is, and Chuck was no rock the boat kind of director. He was, he did everything that he was told to do and brought in films under budget and on time. But with Summer Stock, it gave him an ulcer, he said. He told us this in 1980. He said he just, he got an ulcer. He said he had nightmares trying to get through it with Judy, but they got through it. And the wonderful thing, like Dave said, is that it turned out to be just this wonderful piece of entertainment. So you don't really see kind of the misery and the angst that was behind the scenes making this film. It's all sunny and wonderful and happy ending, which is what it should have been and which it achieved at the very end.
And, Tom and I set the groundwork. We never knew 45 years ago that we'd ever write a book about summer stock. But Tom and I, as college journalists in Minneapolis, sort of had the tenacity to start correspondence with many golden age stars back in the late 70s. And, we were 18 years old, and it seems so crazy today, especially for all of you young people, to understand that we actually had a letter writing campaign with Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. And in the summer of 78, they actually consented to meet with us. So in the ensuing years as college journalists, We had hundreds of meetings with Golden Age stars, including 2 house visits with Gene Kelly. We had a home visit with Charles Walters, Harry Warren, the principal songwriter for Summer Stock, Eddie Bracken, Carlton Carpenter. So we had primary research. Now, the focus of those meetings, 45 years ago wasn't strictly Summer Stock, but we were fortunate enough to know enough to actually get some questions about summer stock back then, of course, which are now part of the book.
That's interesting, because I was actually going to say, like, stemming from that, how do you approach a task such as this? Like, where do you go for the research? Like, what's the process? But you already had a basis of it.
Yeah.
Well, and also back then, pre-internet, by decades, the primary research we did was basically in libraries and microfiche, in the libraries with those the film reels.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a lot of research that way, looking over old newspaper stuff, fan magazines, bios from newspaper microfiche. We current biography, which was almost like an encyclopedia thing that they did every year. They had, all kinds of stuff about some of these stars, and film books, all these old film books when people used to read. We were constantly consulting, all these biographies that we could find in used bookstores or libraries. And that's how we sort of formulated all these questions that we all had right, in our backpacks when we went out to LA to interview all these people.
But in 2018, we published a book called Hollywood Heyday, not just a subtle plug, which was a compilation of 75 of these interviews. And there's Golden Age stars like Vincent Minnelli and Kelly and Astaire and all these people in the book. But about that time, as we finished that, we came upon the idea mutually that we wanted to pursue a project that we could sink our teeth into. You're right. I mean, it's not the making of Meet Me in St. Louis. And you know what? It may not have as many dramatic arcs as the making of Summer Stock. So we, during the pandemic, were able somehow, because a lot of these research libraries were closed off, but the staffs were working from home. They had a lot of content that was then put onto PDFs and digitized. And so we were able to work with them remotely and get a tremendous amount of research materials through the 4 years of the pandemic.
Yeah, and one thing too, I'll add to what Dave said. A lot of these interviews that we did, the current day interviews, we were able to get because of the pandemic. We were able to do Zoom sessions with, Savian Glover, who wrote the foreword. And these people wouldn't have been really probably Lorna Luff, Judy's daughter. They wouldn't have been available probably if the pandemic hadn't happened, but they were sort of twiddling their thumbs at home with nothing to do. So they were, okay, well, let's get a Zoom session going. I got, an hour and a half on Thursday, and we were able to get a lot of these, tributes, and a lot of some Michael Feinstein. All these people contributed because they had time, because they were housebound during the pandemic.
And it was important to us because, again, you're a younger demographic. We're talking about a film that's 73 years old, right? And so, okay, I think we did a deep dive and got a lot of interesting information. We got a lot of script variations and talked about how it transitioned into the final product. But as Tom said, we wanted to go to living artists like the ones he mentioned, Lorna and Tommy Tune and Mario Cantone and Mikhail Berezhnikov and Michael Feinstein and all these people. We wanted their contemporary, their 2023 take on the film. What works today, what doesn't? The other important component is we're not professional dancers. We, I think like all of you, we love and appreciate dance, but I couldn't tell you, a two-step from a barrel roll from, all of these different things. So we thought it was important to talk to real dancers to get some insights without being overly boring. I hope we're not, or academic in the book, but we wanted some actual dancers to give us some insights into it. And one of the people that has been most helpful, there's Corey John Snide and Brenda Buffalino, great accomplished dancers, but Mandy Moore, who was the choreographer of La La Land, sat down with us on Zoom, and we looked at the musical numbers, and she broke them down for us and provide some we think incredible insights into the book and into the movie.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, one of the things I loved in the book was the fact that you dedicated a whole section to each musical number. That was one of my favourite parts, especially the "You Wonderful You." Loved that.
Yeah. And one of the problems, Sarah, and we bring it out in the book, we want to make it clear that the backstory or production delays, which most people know something about, but most people associate them strictly with Judy Garland. And we really, because again, we talked to a lot of Garland experts and a lot of digging, we want to make it clear that while Judy's lateness or her absences did extend the production window, it was no means the only reason this thing took 6 months to film. And one of the biggest reasons beyond Judy, or maybe as big, is Harry Warren and Matt Gordon wrote the core songs to this film. By late December of 1949, they all figured out, you know what? We don't have enough songs to finish this picture. So that's when Matt Gordon was gone. They brought in Jack Brooks. They brought in Sal Chaplin. They wrote "You Wonderful You." That was one of the 4 numbers they wrote. Yep. They wrote, they brought in "Get Happy," which they didn't write. That was an old song by Ted Koehler and Harold Arlen that Judy personally selected. But what does it take when you bring in new numbers? You have to compose them. You have to arrange them. You have to score them. You have to record them.
You have to film them. Yeah, all of it. So that took a lot of time. That extended that whole production window. It wasn't just Judy's, absences because of her, medical trials and tribulations. It was, they were producing. It was after this film wrapped, they actually had to come back and start doing more numbers.
And we need as a society to have more of an empathetic ear, not just to life today, but to Judy.
Yeah,
Judy in 1949 was having a growing addiction to prescription medications. Her marriage to director Vincent Minnelli was on the rocks. It was all intents and purposes over. And she had a 3-year-old toddler, Liza Minnelli, to care for. She had a lot of pressures on her life. Now, we're not here to make excuses. She had a job to do, and she ended up doing.
She did it.
She did it, but she did it because of the support, love, and trust of who Joe Pasternak, the producer, put around her. And that was Chuck Walters, Gene Kelly, Eddie Bracken.
Glory DeHaven.
Yes, and Phil Silvers. Yeah. They not only they loved Judy, they empathized with what she was going through. They said, we're going to stick with this till the finish line. And they really helped bring her over the finish line.
In fact, Gene has famously said in many interviews, and I think we co-opted in the book, he said that basically he would spend a year, not pursuing other projects, American in Paris. He would do anything he had to do because he loved and admired Judy Garland and would stick with this project for a year. It didn't matter. He'd take, when she couldn't come in, he'd get basketball games going on set or whatever. Just they'd wait until she was ready to film, ready to rehearse, and they'd do whatever it took.
And I think if you watch the performance, again, this is not in the same conversation as Meet Me in St. Louis or An American in Paris or Easter, but we think it should be. And when you look at Gene Kelly, Gene came from the stage and he acts, in a big way. But I think if you really look at this performance by Gene, it's a little toned down. It's sort of tender. And the scenes with Judy, it's almost like the acting we think is the best he really ever did, because you can see the reality and the emotion in him and the true affection, respect, and love he has for Judy in the scenes they do together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
Well, we have a cat too that could jump into the frame. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'll probably maul us, but
we have a few scratches here to prove it. Then.
Sorry. I was actually just going to mention you, Carly, just saying it when they were saying that. I'm just looking at you, nodding and agreeing, because it's what you always say, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. There is such a following out there specifically for Judy and Gene, and I personally am such a huge fan of both of them and them together. And this movie is a huge reason why, because the feelings between them are just so genuine. And you take a look at a number like "You Wonderful You," and it is so genuine. It's it almost feels like neither of them are acting. It's as though they're both channeling what they actually truly feel for each other into Joe and Jane. And
totally
and you know, there's two other numbers and two other films that Gene did that were sort of like You Wonderful You, when, you know, the whole grease paint scene and they do their little dance. There's the number with Debbie Reynolds and Singing in the Rain, and the La Comparsita number in Anchors Away with Katherine Grayson. But those are so stagey. There's no really affinity that he had with those actresses. They kind of, you know, they work, but it's not, there's no tenderness, there's no emotional high points, there's no, you know, gentility. It's not like You Wonderful You and Summer Stock. I agree with you. It's like way far and above those other two numbers, and they're all sort of like the same. They're all kind of these same type of number
style.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and I hope we'll test you out and you agree, you look at the numbers that Judy and Gene did together in 3 films, and from a dance / complexity standpoint, you take that Portland Fancy number, which is this really fun, anything you can do, I can do better challenge dance. And not only, again, do you see the emotion, the affection, and the playfulness, but from a dance complexity standpoint, it's probably, again, arguably, and we'd like to hear what you think, the best dance number that they did together in those 3 films.
I think I'd agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I do have a tap dancing background. I do have a tap dancing background.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
I won't go into loads of detail because I didn't know whether Connor wanted to mention a bit more about Portland Fancy.
You're going, yeah.
All I wanted to say is that I 100% agree. That is not an easy routine for Judy. Could dance, but she wasn't a trained dancer. No, that is a complex routine, even the turns and things. And again, it's just that whole playing off each other. It seems very, again, like Carly says, it just seems natural.
Yeah. Well, what I always loved about that too, the Portland Fancy, is not only the chutzpah that they have together, but the nuance. And it's all, you know, you don't even have to look at the steps. If you just look at the glances, at the nuances, at the little glances they're sharing between each other, you know, that's really star quality. That shows, I mean, there are other professional dancers at MGM that arguably were more technically proficient than Gene Kelly. One of them was Tommy Rawle, who we interviewed too years and years ago. Amazing dancer. He's in various movies, My Sister Eileen with Bob Fosse. But, you know, he just didn't have it. He didn't have it in the face. He didn't have it in the nuance. And that's 2/3 of the number. I mean, it's just watching how they react to each other with every step and every turn. I mean, it's just wonderful. And it basically is, to me, a demonstration of star quality, of why they were huge stars. You look at that number from top to bottom, and it's amazing.
And Sarah, you probably, as a dancer, can appreciate, you know, again, one of the myth busters is that the Get Happy delayed the production. It was done weeks or months after they wrapped the principal photography. Again, we go into great depth to talk about that is false information. She did wrap. She came back only in a couple of weeks later. But the reality is, it wasn't the last thing filmed for Summerstock. It was Gene Kelly's personal favorite solo tap dance that he does in the barn with the squeaky floorboard, and the newspaper. And Sarah, you appreciate, again, what Mandy Moore said. Not only is that an amazing routine that gets applause, as does Get Happy and other numbers, but it's such a purely cinematic dance routine. The Dig for Your Dinner, the Portland, those are things you can't do in a live stage performance. These were artists that knew how to stage show-stopping dance routines strictly for the film medium.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I did enjoy the Garland Gab's all about myth busting as well. It's one of the main reasons we were creators. But I was one for years, thought Get Happy was performed months later. I did love how you busted the myths, as you said, about Judy causing all the delays. The Get Happy number, that was filmed a lot earlier than people realise. And then there was also a little bit of a thing about the costume as well, with Vincent Minnelli.
Yeah, the costuming was kind of interesting. I mean, she wears in Get Happy the same costume 2 years previously that she was good wearing a number in Easter Parade called Mr. Monotony that was filmed but never used for Easter Parade, and it's the exact same costume. And in Vincent Minnelli's autobiography, I remember it well, he said that the whole idea for that costume was Tamara Giva, who was a Russian prima ballerina back then. But we found out that really it wasn't her that was the inspiration for that costume that became the Come On Get Happy costume. It was Marlene Dietrich. And Irene, who was the costumer, the MGM costume designer, had a speech, or she had a conversation on telephone the day before they were thinking about doing this costume with Marlene Dietrich. And she said, well, why don't we just do a costume like as a tribute to Marlene Dietrich for this Mr. Monotony number? And that was who the inspiration was for that costume. It was Marlene Dietrich. So when you see her in Come On, Get Happy, Judy doing it, that's the Marlene Dietrich costume that they were thinking about, not this Tamara Giva ballerina from back in the 1940s.
Well, memories blur over time, and, there's no exception. We bring in information in the book that someone said this and someone said that, and we bring both sides in, and we don't make judgments for the most part. We let the reader decide what's Hollywood lore and what's fact. And the Get Happy number that Judy did, the other issue that comes up, is the weight issue, her weight. There's a term that, in the first part of the film, until Get Happy, there's a term, she was a little bit Zoftig, but I think you can argue that in some of the previous films, including in The Good Old Summertime, she was almost alarmingly thin.
In The Pirates, certainly.
Yeah. So we actually think she looks pretty healthy in Summer Stock. And then she did go away, and she did drop a few pounds when they actually did go before the cameras in the Get Happy number. But again, we try to, put all of these things in factual context, and again, let the reader decide. I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And certainly, I looked at Judy in some of her previous work and think, she really looked healthy in Summer Stock.
She did.
I think we all agree that, when she was, I won't say heavy, because I don't think she's heavy in Summer Stock at all, but when she's not as thin as she has been in other movies, she looks better with a little bit more weight on her than.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've actually seen some of her costumes from Summer Stock in person. I saw the one that she wore during the All For You number, and one of her farm outfits with the overalls. And
the bibs.
And you see them in person, and it's still so tiny. And then
she was tiny,
yeah, and it's just.
Well, and Tom and I take personal pride in we're both Minnesotans, as was Judy, right? So we have that Midwest pride, knowing that Judy was from the same state that we grew up and were born in as well.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Let's see what else. That we want. So I think the other number I think was worth talking about briefly that really didn't get a lot of legs or play was the Friendly Star ballad. Talk about a beautiful dress, and it's a really wonderful, loving ballad. It's beautifully filmed by Chuck. Mm-hmm. The sequence with Jean right after is really a warm, well done scene, and I think Michael Feinstein told us that people were a little surprised that wasn't sort of the big song from the film. And I don't believe, from what we can tell or what we've researched, I don't believe Judy ever performed it in any of her concerts. But yet it's a really lovely number. Yeah,
and even Lorna Luft, told us in a Zoom that she loves that number. She agrees that it's not in the upper canon of great Judy, numbers like Over the Rainbow or The Man That Got Away or anything like that. But she thinks that it's just a beautifully rendered ballad. And, it's wonderful, and it's sort of underrated. And I think maybe the only person other than Judy that covered it was Michael Feinstein. He covered it in an album that he did.
And the other thing I think is worth mentioning is that And we saw it in front of a fairly large audience yesterday, so we could sort of gauge audience reaction today in 2023. So it has an amazing supporting cast, and I don't think we can say enough about Eddie Bracken, Gloria DeHaven, Phil Silvers, Hans Conried, Ray Collins, Carlton Carpenter, great supporting. But it's interesting how this film sort of has two comic relief actors, one being Eddie Bracken as this neurotic Orville, the fiance, and then Phil Silvers. And I can tell you, I mean, our personal perspective is we think that Eddie Bracken is a scene stealer. He's absolutely terrific. He got the biggest laughs yesterday in front of a live audience. And well, Phil Silvers is a little more burlesque. There's a little more
shticky,
over the top shtick in that. And his stuff doesn't play nearly as well. And I think we go into a pretty good detail into the book about the different script versions, the earlier ones that had literally pages of this over-the-top comedic, we'll call it nonsense, that they were giving to Phil Silvers. And fortunately, we believe it was Chuck Walters who had the good sense to say, I'm going to take the red pen and these pages are out. There's enough Phil Silvers shtick, considering he was fifth billed and he has a lot of screen time being fifth billed. There's enough Phil Silvers to go around. And thankfully, because of Chuck, we don't have more than we have.
There were about like 10 or 15 lines of burlesquing, working off Shakespeare, where he was just doing Shakespeare puns. I mean, it was just constantly throughout the film. And I think there's one or two that they left in, but there would have been a ton more. It was like this like continuing in joke, that Chuck, I'm sure, redlined out. He just said, okay, enough of this.
And it's 109 minutes, which is perfectly in line with the MGM musicals. And again, for people who aren't as familiar with summer stock, we make the argument, couple arguments we make, but that for the 109 minutes, there's arguably as many quality musical sequences and numbers in this 109 minutes than any other MGM musical. And, the other thing that we talk about again is, Judy's performance. It's so genuine. And when we interviewed Harry Warren, the songwriter, many years ago, we asked him, how do you, with like a grade school education, sit at a keyboard and compose these amazing songs? And he said, I can't explain it. It's a God-given talent. So how does Judy come across as such a natural singer, dancer, actor?
Yeah, great actress.
I mean, again, could we say it's just you're born with it, and it's once in a lifetime, once in a generation they come along. And thank God we have Judy, we have Gene, we have Fred Astaire, and the handful of one-of-a-kind artists from that era.
And there will never be another one like them.
No,
right.
No, exactly. That we always quote the line from That's Entertainment when they show a Fred Astaire, Eleanor Powell dance scene, and his line is, you can wait around and hope, but you'll never see the likes of this again.
And the Liza Minnelli film, quote from that film too, That's Entertainment, thank God for film, because it proves how great these people were. I mean, a lot of the great stage performers from, eras ago, you read about them and you got to admit, the Sarah Bernhardts, you got to imagine how great they were. Judy Garland, it'll be evergreen. She'll be, you think, you want to know how great she is? Here's all her films. Watch them.
Yeah.
What's amazing to me is that, Judy's legacy just continues to carry on and on and on. And we always see a bunch of young teenagers getting into her and starting to, watch her films and just become engrossed in who she was.
Yeah.
And she is absolutely timeless.
Yeah.
And I can't see that ever happening again with someone like, I don't know who's a modern star, Emma Stone, for example. I just
Hugh
not
Jackman
to throw her under the bus or whatever, but
no, right.
You don't see that kind of magic.
No, and I mean, that's a really good point. And also, Judy was, as Donald O'Connor would say in Singing in the Rain, Judy was a triple threat. I mean, she was a great actress. Katharine Hepburn said she was one of the 3 greatest actresses on stage or film that she ever saw. She was amazing. She had the voice, amazing voice. She could dance, she could act, she could sing, she could emote. I mean, she had it all, and it was all natural. It was a God-given gift that, I mean, how many times is lightning going to strike for someone else? I mean, someone like Barbara Streisand, beautiful, beautiful instrument, beautiful voice, but in some of the other areas, she's great. I'm not going to throw her under the bus, but I mean, my God, I mean, is she Judy Garland as far as all these, even dramatic movies and comedy movies? I mean, Judy just had everything.
Yeah. And, the other thing that we talk about, well, how can it will never replicate it, is the studio factory system, particularly MGM as it pertained to musicals. It had the MGM orchestra. They had the greatest musicians, the greatest arrangers. They had access to the greatest composers. But below the line, behind the scenes, the people operating the cameras, the people building the sets, the costume designers like Helen Rose, and these people never all under one roof or one campus, the 200 acres of the MGM studio campus. They were there as a factory to just keep making these films. So they worked as a giant unit. And, we had three great producers over at MGM of these great musicals. We had Arthur Freed, Joe Pasternak, who did Summer Stock, and Jack Cummings. It was the right time, the right place in history to create this unique, original American art form, which is the original Hollywood musical.
Incredible.
Absolutely. Actually, it's something like you're talking about the sets even, and it's something that, say, my friends, my era, when they have seen some of these movies, one friend in particular has often said to me, "Is that inside? Say the farm?" Yeah, that's actually inside.
Yeah.
100% in a soundstage. You're exactly right. They did that Happy Harvest number at a ranch north of Los Angeles. And we actually had a wonderful gentleman named Tom Early, who actually was nice enough to scout the location for us and give us a download that we included in that number section in the book.
Exactly where it occurred, because it's Tom Early's favorite number of all time, Howdy Neighbor. So he's been out there. He was even trying to find the original tractor. Because there's an Earthbuster tractors out there, and he took a picture of one, but it wasn't the same one. It was the same era. Yeah, it was great.
We've had Tom.
So we have in the acknowledgement section, we do rightfully thank a lot of people who provided us with the information to help us put this puzzle together.
Yeah. One of the reasons too, it was a little tough, not to pat ourselves on the back, but Arthur Freed, producer at MGM of great musicals, has just voluminous notes and stuff, that archives that are accessible for his productions. But Pasternak, there's nothing. I mean, there's very little. So that was where the puzzle piecing together stuff was, where we had to kind of, figure out from, soup to nuts how this film was made, because there were very few archival materials. There were some scripts, and, there was some, anecdotes from different stars that were in it and people. So that was where the piecing together happened.
And, we saw that Jory Sherry had executive meetings at MGM, production meetings, and we would glean, those were all housed at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And we were able to look, but as Tom said, the Freed had a day-by-day breakdown. You knew exactly what song, what number, what was filmed on any given day. And we were able to, thanks to some like the Judy Room, be able to see when a song was recorded, because those things exist. But yeah, we couldn't go, November 28th, 1949, November 30th, we couldn't get to that specificity just like you could with a Freed production.
In fact, one of the things that we surmise is that the final number that was filmed, the squeaky board newspaper dance that Gene did, we think that Gene directed it. We're pretty sure that Gene, not only starred in it and it was his solo, but he directed it because Chuck was off the film by then. And we don't think that Chuck would have come back just to direct a number with Gene in it when Gene could direct it himself, having done, On the Town previously to Summer Stock. So we think that it was sort of a Gene show, that last number. He starred in it and directed it.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually something, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I noticed it, and it's a little bit interesting. when it comes to the surviving pre-recordings for Summer Stock, like we have the raw pre-recordings, but there's only ever one take of each of the Summer Stock songs, whereas a lot of her other productions with, you know, The Pirate, we've got a couple of alternate takes of Mac the Black or Voodoo, whatever. But interestingly, all that seems to have survived for Summer Stock is one final take. It's like as if they didn't, what do they say, print or whatever, the alternate.
Yeah.
Tommy, I don't know.
It's a little bit of a mystery, just like the fact that MGM did not keep all of these numbers that were actually were cut from the films. You know, if you look at the MGM musicals, there were a lot of numbers that were shot that were not dance songs, what have you. And I think, you know, we talked to Rex Reed, the, you know, famous critic here in the States, who sort of did a deep dive into that. And he just said the studio didn't care or think that anyone would ever be interested in this. And just think if we could unearth every number that was cut from a film that no longer exists, what, you know, we'd have That's Entertainment all over again, and it would be amazing.
And unearthing is a key word here, because when MGM was taken over by Kirk Kerkorian, and you know, and it went through all these permutations of ownership back and forth like a ping pong ball. That's when the back lot was sold off, when all the costumes and all of that stuff was put up for auction. And a lot of these archives were actually thrown into a landfill, which is part of a LA freeway system now. They, you know, a lot of I think what you say, Connor, is true. A lot of those post recordings and pre-recordings and alternate musical takes are, you know, moldering under 100 feet of sod right now. They tried to keep like one outtake or one score, but most of them they just tossed. It's sad.
And unfortunately, I think maybe because of Michael Feinstein and others, they were able to find, rescue, save a lot of the original arrangements.
Right.
And, you know, one of the people that was helpful in a book, Joan Ellison, who's an accomplished concert performer and does some of Judy's repertoire, you know, through Michael, was able to, and does perform some of those original orchestrations, and what great orchestrations they were.
Yeah.
Incredible. We should probably touch on the fact that Summer Stock, when it was released on myself and Sarah's side of the world, it was not called Summer Stock, because to us, Summer Stock doesn't really mean anything on this side of the world. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
So it was If You Feel Like Singing, you know, that was, you know, the title. And, you know, you have, what is it called? There's a live theater in the UK, pantomime, and right?
It's repertory theater,
yeah. But yeah, Summer Stock is basically a repertory theater. And it's a troupe of players that come in and they go from city to city and perform these musical comedies. And in fact, after the MGM musical pretty much died off, so many of the MGM alumni like Van Johnson, Howard Keel, Jane Powell, they performed in stage versions of popular musicals for a week at a time in cities like Milwaukee or Des Moines, or, you know, all over the country. And that was a form of Summer Stock. Milwaukee had the Melody Top. In fact, one of the preeminent Garland experts, John Fricke, who's been tremendously helpful for our book, John started in Milwaukee working at the Melody Top Theater, and he got to know so many of these MGM alumni who came through in Summer Stock at this theater venue. So yeah, Summer Stock isn't a known term, and it was Australia as well. They didn't use the title.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, and Connor, that, you know, if you were seeing a print of it today, you would see the Summer Stock, correct? You wouldn't see, do they still have prints available If You Feel Like Singing?
Now, this is an interesting thing, because like I've gone and done a little bit of digging over the years in some of the Irish like newspaper archives. I have never found If You Feel Like Singing like as a release here in Ireland. Now, I'm sure it's been released in the UK, but I could find Nellie Kelly, I could find In the Good Old Summertime, I could find Easter Parade, I even found Words and Music. I've never come across a cinema reference to If You Feel Like Singing. So I'm not sure did it ever make its way from the UK to Ireland or not.
Interesting.
It's not, like, if it's whenever it's been on TV here, I think I've seen it from the UK, like the BBC or whatever have shown it. It's been the summer stock, hasn't it, Sarah? Like we've never actually seen If You Feel Like Singing as the title of it.
And maybe the prints that were, don't exist anymore.
Yeah,
Now,
who
what's
knows?
interesting is we have two friends, Ben and Paul, I've gone blank, that are in London as well. And there was the British Film Institute did a showing for Judy's 100th birthday. Now, when they went to see The Clock, it was the British title of Under the Clock. So they think that was the 35 millimeter like print from the archive.
They showed some stuff. I think they showed summer stock during that festival as well, but I think it was summer stock.
I think summer stock, yeah.
So it mustn't exist.
Yeah, and there was a lyric, and I don't test me on this, but it's in this Get Happy section of the book, in which there was an original lyric. I don't know if it was Get Ready for the Judgment Day or whatever. That in the UK, they took umbrage to it, and I think they had to change it or redub it or something when it played originally in the UK in 1950.
Wow, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, and we have it in the book, but I can't recall the specifics.
Yeah, tiny type, I think. It's like a note.
Interesting.
So anything else? What else do you want to know?
Yeah. What's your favorite number and why?
I was just about to ask that.
Oh, ask us?
Oh, back at you.
It's not heavenly music.
Oh man.
I just have actually a quick question about heavenly music. Can I just interject that really quick? So at the end of the film where we see Joe and Jane finally sharing, well, I guess their second kiss of the film, but really when they realize that they are in fact in love, we do see Jane in an outfit that very much resembles Jean and Phil's Heavenly Silvers. Wow.
Right.
So that was
we know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, that was shot for continuity purposes because Judy had no intention of doing heavenly music, and maybe that's another attribute of good taste, right?
Yeah.
And so she never recorded it. She was never in the discussions about filming it, but for that backstage continuity, they had to slap sort of that costume on it, which gives the appearance like, did she ever film it? Was she supposed to be
cut out? Yeah.
And so fortunately it wasn't. It was a play. It was sort of intended to be a little bit like a sequel to A Couple of Swells that Fred did with Judy and Easter Parade. Of course, that one works significantly better. And it really turned into this sort of, like a burlesque Phil Silvery thing.
Yeah.
Jean sort of had the wig on, looking like Jeff Daniels from Dumb and Dumber and things like that. And it was goofy. But again, they had to put a number in because Judy and Jean did You Wonderful You, and she couldn't have gone from that costume and that number right into Get Happy. Now, someone did note, maybe on our Facebook page, that in the case of Heavenly Music and Get Happy, you have one of the worst numbers ever done in a musical film, followed by one of the best numbers ever done in a musical film. So there's sort of that interesting dichotomy. But it is what it is. It's a novelty number. If people cringe during it, we perfectly understand. There are people who like it. They come up,
especially little kids.
Yeah.
They love it.
With
little
the dogs
kids that come. Yeah, like, oh my God,
It's goofy and so it's low humor. But it works for some people.
Is that another myth then? Because a lot of the biographies say that Judy was originally slated for it and she was not up to performing it because of her illness, so Phil Silvers replaced her. Is that just another one of those myths?
Yeah, because if she wasn't up for filming it, she never recorded it.
Yeah.
So she, because everything was pre-recorded and they were they were dubbing or lip syncing when the cameras were rolling. So no, from our research, she wanted no part of it, and Phil Silvers came in. The other little tidbit is you notice at the very end of the film when they do Howdy Neighbor Happy Harvest, it comes with Jean, Judy, and Phil Silvers come out at the same time. And Judy rightfully said, and she was good friends with Phil, you're not going to be in front with us as this film ends. And Phil Silvers writes a little about it in his own memoir. We talk about it briefly in the book, but it wouldn't have made it. He was fifth billed in this movie. Why did he even come out with them is a good question. It should have been Judy and Jean.
Yeah, and then he goes into the background immediately.
Thankfully, he fades into the background, and it ends with Judy and Jean in that clasp together. But it's, again, you can sort of scratch your head about little things like that.
It should end with just Judy and Jean, though. Nothing to do with ego.
Right. Yeah. It's a boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl, not boy gets girl, and then his other friend comes in too. It just doesn't.
Unfortunately, Herb does fade to the background, but again, it's a little weird that he comes out equally with them at the beginning of that number.
There's another myth that I really enjoyed that you busted. Again, it's is that the myth is that this was originally slated as a project for Judy and Mickey Rooney.
Yeah,
but Jean was attached to it even before Judy was attached to it. Apparently,
he was. Right, and if you look at the chronology of MGM, Mickey was Awards and Music in 1948 was his last movie, and then he was off the lot. That was it. And Gene was, as we said, totally on the ascension, and he was always attached. I mean, there were Judy was dropped in and out of it over the months, and other co-stars were thought to come in. Even at one point, even Ricardo Montalban was going to be in it. I mean, God knows, but Gene was the constant. He was always going to be in this, and then Judy eventually it solidified into a Judy and Gene thing.
It's sort of akin to the whole conversation and a bit of Hollywood lore, and John Fricke certainly could set the record straight clearer than I can about this. Should Shirley Temple was considered for Dorothy, right? And I know that talking to John, these songs by Harburg and Ireland were specifically meant for Judy. I mean, Shirley could never pulled that off. No. By the same token, if you look at the whole casting for Summerstock, Jean and Judy Garland were announced as the stars of Summerstock in December of 1948. That was almost a year before that film went in front of the camera. In March of 1950, when MGM had its national sales meeting and Dory Sherry was presenting his upcoming slate of motion pictures, Summerstock was mentioned. It's quoted in the book exactly from his script that he gave to the salespeople, and it was a Gene Kelly vehicle. They didn't go as far as mentioning the other co-stars. And as Tom correctly points out, then from about March and through the summer of 49, some names, I think June Allison came in and out. And then when Judy was at rehab for 2 stints in Boston in the summer of 49 to reduce her dependency on prescription meds, get her weight under control, get her eating under control, getting her sleep under control, they wanted to bring Judy back. And from that point on, she was slated for Summerstock. And again, Mickey Rooney, because of what Tom said and other things, was not given serious conversation, but yet it's become part of Hollywood lore just because it's let's put a show on in the barn.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It's amazing.
It's one of they always happen, though, these myths, not just about Judy. I mean, Judy is the subject of far too many of them, but it's just, Carly says it the best on our Wizard of Oz podcast when she says people get a tiny little nugget of something and then it just becomes this legend.
Yeah.
What's the line from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
If legend becomes the truth, print the legend. If fact becomes legend, print the legend.
Legend.
Yeah. It's just people, they love that. They love conspiracies. They love this. And they're always sort of willing to believe the negative side of something instead of what really happened. It's just more interesting. Usually, it's more fun. But. Yeah, and that's sort of the reason why we were trying to myth bust as much as we could. I mean, and follow the facts as they were laid out.
We don't sugarcoat it.
No, we don't.
And one prominent historian, really sent us a beautiful note complimenting us, how she was amazed how we thread the needle so perfectly and gave such a balanced account of this film in this book. And again, we're appreciative to that kind of feedback, and that's what we were striving for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm conscious of your time as well, because I know you've got an hour only. Carly and Sarah, do you have anything else we wanted to ask specifically?
I just wanted to just circle back because I really want to know what your two favorite musical numbers are in the film.
I will say, I will be not the naysayer, but I will say not Come On, Get Happy, not The Squeaky Board. One of my very favorites from the first time I ever saw the film was Dig for Your Dinner, because that was like, what is this? I didn't even know he was going to dance in this. And it's a classic example of Gene working in a confined space, doing a tap dance, like a pneumatic drill in 4 square feet area. I mean, it's just amazing. And the way he circles the table, the way Chuck goes around the table and then pushes up, comes out. And he's in front of the table doing his barrel rolls, those variations on those turns with his arms sort of flung out. I just think it's great. And it's a great chart by Skip Martin. Wonderful chart, big band, sort of jazzy chart that in the appendix, Michael Feinstein talks a lot about Skip Martin and Conrad Salinger's arrangements. And it's just a classic example of everything coming together to do this wonderful tap routine for Gene.
What's your second favorite?
Second favorite? Well, it's probably a tie between Come On, Get Happy and The Squeaky Board. I mean, The Squeaky Board is legendary, rightfully so. It's just a great number. As Dave said, as Mandy Moore said, it never could have been accomplished on a proscenium stage, in a live setting. It's totally cinematic. And it's just great how he works with the sounds. He works, from the squeak, there's humor in it. It's like a lot of Gene's numbers. It's explosive. It has that like incredible energy, and then it ends on the silent sort of note, and the whistling that he does. We even found out who the guy dubbed the whistling. He was the same guy that did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the whistling in the Clint Eastwood film. This guy who's like a professional whistler, and that's who does the whistling that starts that number and ends it.
I'll be more cliche and still probably stick with, The Squeaky Board and Get Happy. But again, when we talk about 109 minutes, you have Happy, Howdy Neighbor. You have Dig for Your Dinner.
Friendly Star.
You have Friendly Star. You have the Squeaky Board. You have Get Happy. I mean, I just reeled off 5 terrific numbers in this film. And,
right.
I think that the backstory is wonderfully fun for musical film fans, but it's just still a really joyously entertaining film. And if people have not discovered it, take a watch. You're really going to feel better. And boy, we need to feel better right now.
Right. And remember to buy the book, please.
Oh, out now.
It is out now. Amazon, your independent booksellers, we can't say enough about them and supporting them.
Great.
Obviously, the big chains in the States like Barnes and Noble, but wherever books are available, if you Google Come On, Get Happy Summer Stock or Google our names as authors, it will come up in a variety of locations.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get mine.
And we want to thank all of you as a younger generation. For keeping the flame. We always kind of go and compliment people who are keeping the flame of not just Judy, but the golden age films alive for future generations.
Hats off to you guys, really.
So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yes.
David and Tom, we can't thank you enough for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Been a lot of fun.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
Replaying it for us. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Have a wonderful week ahead and peace to everyone.
Yeah, peace.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Remember, neighbor, when you work for Mother Nature, you